The camera drifts slowly across a quiet suburban street, the kind that feels borrowed from a real estate brochure. Every lawn looks freshly trimmed, every hedge perfectly squared, and every front porch dressed with the same welcoming touches: flags, rocking chairs, hanging baskets swaying in the faint evening breeze. The narrator's voice cuts in, steady, warm, but tinged with a weight we don't yet understand. Narrator, VO. When we first moved into the neighborhood, it looked like something out of a postcard. Perfectly trimmed lawns, freshly painted shutters, and neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs in the evening. It was the kind of place people dream of when they imagine finally settling down. The camera pushes closer to one house in particular, a modest two-story with pale siding, a clean driveway, and a brand-new welcome mat. The moving truck has just pulled away, and a family stands on the porch. The father, David, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, work boots dusty from unloading, rests an arm around his wife. Laura, early 40s, warm but weary-eyed, clutches a box labeled kitchen. Beside them, their daughter Emily, 19, in jeans and a work uniform polo, leans against the railing, scrolling her phone, half present and half detached. The setting sun casts a soft glow across the cul-de-sac. Kids play basketball at the far end of the street. A man waters his lawn in slow, rhythmic arcs. A couple jogs past with a golden retriever trotting happily beside them. It feels perfect. David. Quietly, to Laura. Looks like we made the right move. Laura gives him a tired but hopeful smile. Laura. It feels safe. Peaceful. Maybe this is it. A fresh start. Emily glances up from her phone, skeptical but softening. Emily. Yeah, I guess it's nice. Feels different. Quiet. The narrator continues, as the camera pans to the little details, the hum of sprinklers, the laughter of kids echoing down the street, the clink of glasses from a backyard barbecue. Narrator, VO. At first, everything seemed perfect. My wife started her garden, my daughter settled into her routine, and I loved the calm after years of city noise. The streets felt safe. Children played basketball in driveways, people watered their lawns at sunset, and you could almost believe this was the kind of community where nothing bad ever happened. The camera slowly tilts up, revealing the neighborhood from above in a wide, sweeping drone shot. Rows of houses lined like toy models, each one pristine. Uniform. Identical. And then the tone shifts. The music darkens ever so slightly. The camera lingers on something small but out of place, a yellow slip of paper taped to a neighbor's front door. Narrator, VO. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. And in our case, those cracks came in the form of paper, yellow slips of paper taped to doors and slipped into mailboxes. The image freezes for just a beat on that slip of paper, the inked words blurred but foreboding. Fade to black. The screen fades in from black, and the soft strum of an acoustic guitar carries us into the next moment. The morning sun washes over David's house, painting the white siding gold. A sprinkler clicks rhythmically across the lawn as birds dart between telephone wires. Inside, the kitchen hums with the ordinary chaos of family life. Laura, still in her robe, hair tied back, sets down a plate of scrambled eggs. She hums faintly as she waters a little basil plant on the windowsill. Emily, in her work uniform polo and sneakers, rushes through, stuffing a granola bar into her backpack. David. Leaning against the counter, coffee in hand. Slow down, kiddo. You'll make it on time. Emily. Grinning faintly. Not if traffic's bad. Laura shoots David a playful look. Laura. She's got your stubborn streak. David chuckles and lifts his mug in mock salute. The narrator's voice overlays the warmth of the scene, slow and steady. Narrator, VO. For a while, life settled into a rhythm. We had breakfast together in the mornings, my wife started filling the windowsills with plants, and my daughter, well, she had one foot in our home and the other racing toward adulthood. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we could breathe. Cut to exterior shots. Laura kneeling in the garden bed, dirt on her gloves as she gently pats down the soil around new flowers. David hauling a toolbox from the garage, fixing a squeaky hinge on the fence gate. Emily sitting on the porch swing after her shift, scrolling her phone, her sneakers tapping idly against the wood. Neighbors wave as they pass by. An older couple with a dachshund. A young father teaching his toddler to ride a bike. David waves back, almost surprised at the friendliness. Narrator, VO. People smiled, waved, and made small talk. We were newcomers, sure, but there was a sense of belonging. The kind of neighborhood where people lent sugar, watched each other's pets, and chatted by the mailbox. The music builds lightly, almost idyllic. But then, just as the sense of comfort cements, the camera lingers on something small but strange. Across the street, a man in a neatly pressed polo, Mr. Thompson, 50s, stern, clipboard in hand, pauses as he walks by. He doesn't wave. Doesn't smile. Instead, his eyes scan David's property. His gaze fixes on the garden bed Laura just planted, then flicks to the recycling bin by the garage. He scribbles something onto his clipboard before walking on. The camera cuts back to David, who hasn't noticed. He wipes sweat from his brow, satisfied with his work. Narrator, VO. But even in a place that looked this perfect, there were eyes watching. Quietly. Silently. Measuring what fit in their world, and what didn't. A subtle drone shot pulls back over the cul-de-sac. From above, the houses seem identical. The lawns identical. The driveways identical. Every detail in order. Every home lined up in neat rows like teeth in a smile that feels a little too forced. Narrator, VO. We didn't realize it yet, but that smile had teeth. And soon, we'd feel them bite. The screen fades to a still image of the neighborhood, bright, cheerful, but now undercut with a haunting score. Fade out. The sound of a mailbox creaking open cuts through the morning quiet. David, still in his work clothes from an early shift, button-up shirt rolled at the sleeves, tie loosened, walks down the driveway holding a coffee thermos. He opens the box, expecting bills or flyers. Instead, there's a white envelope, stark and official, stamped with the logo of the HOA. He frowns, sliding it out. The paper crinkles as he tears it open. Close up on the letter, notice a violation. Narrator, VO. The first one came barely a month after we moved in. A violation notice. Cold, impersonal, and stamped with authority. David's eyes scan the text. The offense? Unauthorized garden plantings. Cut to Laura in the front yard, crouched happily over her flowers. She tucks in the edges of a planter bed, oblivious. Her sun hat shields her face, her gloves stained with dirt. Narrator, VO. My wife's flowers. The same ones she'd carefully planted, watered, and fussed over every morning. Apparently, they didn't meet community aesthetic standards. David approaches, letter in hand. David. Holding it up. You're not gonna believe this. Laura removes a glove, takes the letter, and reads. Her smile fades. Laura. This is ridiculous. David sighs, rubbing his forehead. Narrator, VO. We thought it was a mistake. Maybe some clerk in an office somewhere had hit the wrong key. So, I called the number listed at the bottom. Cut to David sitting at the dining table, phone pressed to his ear, the letter laid flat in front of him. His face tenses as a muffled voice answers on the other end. Narrator, VO. Turns out, it wasn't a mistake. The flowers were, in fact, unapproved landscaping. We were ordered to remove them within 10 days or face a fine. Quick montage. Laura standing over her garden, hands on hips, frustration clear. Emily leaning against the porch rail, shaking her head. David pacing in the living room, the letter in one hand, phone still pressed to his ear. Narrator, VO. It was petty. childish, even. A garden. Flowers. Of all things to start a fight over. But it wasn't the flowers, not really. It was control. That evening, as the sun dips low, the neighborhood looks serene. Lawns trimmed to identical lengths. Driveways swept spotless. But in front of David's home, Laura's flowers bloomed defiantly, little bursts of color against the rigid green of conformity. The camera pans slowly across the street. There he is again, Mr. Thompson, 50s, stern, polo tucked in, clipboard in hand. He stops on the sidewalk, staring at the flowers. His lips press into a thin line. He scribbles something on his clipboard before walking on. Narrator, VO. And then we realized, it wasn't just one notice. It wasn't just one person. Someone was watching. Waiting. Writing us up for every little thing. The music shifts darker, more urgent. Next morning, David walks outside to find another envelope on his door. This time, trash bin visibility. A fine for leaving the bin out too long after pickup. Cut to Emily walking in from her shift, tossing her bag down. She notices the stack of letters piling on the counter. Emily. Seriously? Again? Her tone is sharp, irritated. David doesn't answer, just stares at the stack, jaw tightening. Narrator, VO. What started as a single violation became a steady drip of harassment. Each letter a warning. Each fine a reminder. We weren't neighbors to them. We were targets. The screen lingers on the envelope stamped in bold red ink, final notice before fine. Narrator, VO. And little did we know, this was only the beginning. The music cuts abruptly, leaving a hollow silence. Fade out. A cold wind rustles through the pristine cul-de-sac, but David barely notices. He's crouched by the porch steps, picking up a small pile of HOA violation letters, each one stamped in bold red ink. The stack in his hand is thick now, the paper edges frayed from frustration. Narrator, VO. One notice turned into two. Two turned into six. And within a few short weeks, it became a storm. A storm delivered straight to our doorstep. Cut to Laura in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she unfolds yet another letter. Her voice cracks as she reads aloud. Laura. Improper mailbox color? What does that even mean? On the counter behind her, the letters are stacked neatly, almost like an altar to bureaucracy. The camera lingers on the words, trash bin visibility, garden noncompliance, lawn overgrowth, unauthorized vehicle parking. Narrator, VO. They weren't just rules anymore. They were weapons. Every little detail, every small imperfection, was another excuse to fine us. And the fines weren't small. 50 here. 100 there. It added up fast. Montage. David at the kitchen table with a calculator, rubbing his temples as numbers add up. Laura watering her flowers at dusk, looking over her shoulder nervously. Emily in uniform, slamming her car door harder than she means to after spotting Mr. Thompson strolling past again, clipboard in hand. Narrator, VO. And always, there was him. Mr. Thompson. Walking the sidewalks like he owned them. Eyes sharp, clipboard ready. He never smiled. Never waved. He just watched. Cut to a close-up of Emily, her jaw clenched, staring from the upstairs window as Thompson pauses in front of their driveway. He scribbles something down, then looks directly up at her window. Their eyes lock. Emily doesn't flinch, but her hand curls into a fist. Narrator, VO. My daughter saw him more than anyone. And she didn't like it. Not one bit. The next day, David returns home to find a bright yellow notice taped directly to the front door. It flaps violently in the wind, impossible to miss. Narrator, VO. That one wasn't about trash cans. Or flowers. Or mailboxes. No, this one was different. It accused us of endangering community harmony. Whatever that meant. David rips it down, his face hardening. He doesn't take it inside, he crumples it right there on the porch and tosses it into the trash. Cut to nighttime. Laura lies awake, staring at the ceiling. Emily paces her room, her boots still on. David sits at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a lone circle of light, papers spread around him. The camera pans in close, violation letters, HOA bylaws, bank statements. His shoulders slump under the weight of it all. Narrator, VO. They wanted us to give up. To bend. To break. To sell the house and leave. That's how they got rid of families who didn't fit their perfect picture. But then, a small spark of defiance. Laura places her hand gently on David's shoulder. Laura. We're not leaving. This is our home. Her voice is quiet, but the conviction behind it cuts through the silence. The scene shifts. Emily steps outside in the early dawn light, still in her Navy SEAL trainer sweats. She jogs past Thompson, who is scribbling in his clipboard again. She doesn't say a word, but her stare is icy, unyielding. He looks away first. Narrator, VO. They underestimated us. They thought we'd roll over like so many others had. But what they didn't know was that we were ready to fight back. The music builds, low strings, steady and ominous. Final shot, David, Laura, and Emily sitting together at the dining table. The violation letters are spread out between them. David picks one up, sets it down, and then leans forward, determination etched on his face. Narrator, VO. The harassment had gone too far. And that's when we decided it was time to push back. Fade to black. The sun has barely set, but the street feels darker than usual. Porch lights flicker on in neat rows, one after another, until the entire cul-de-sac glows in that carefully curated, uniform way the HOA loves. But outside the Miller home, something breaks the calm. David pulls into the driveway after a long shift, headlights sweeping across the lawn. His brow furrows. Narrator, VO. It started with letters. Then fines. Then whispers at board meetings. But this was different. This was personal. He steps out of the car and freezes. His garage door is plastered with spray-painted words in jagged red paint, rule breakers. The camera lingers on the dripping letters. The paint is fresh. The smell of chemicals still lingers in the air. David's hands shake as he pulls out his phone and calls for Laura and Emily. Laura rushes outside, gasping, covering her mouth with both hands. Emily follows, fists clenched, scanning the shadows like a soldier on patrol. Laura. Oh my God. David, who would? She stops herself. They all know who would. Narrator, VO. Of course, there was no proof. No cameras. No eyewitnesses. But we didn't need them. We knew exactly whose fingerprints were on this, maybe not literally, but in spirit. Mr. Thompson and his board. A neighbor across the street peeks through her curtains, then quickly shuts them again. Another homeowner steps onto their porch, sees the scene, and ducks back inside without a word. The street is silent. Complicit. Emily walks up to the garage door and touches the paint with her fingertips. She rubs them together and shakes her head. Emily. Still wet. The silence hangs heavy until David finally speaks. David. That's it. No more letters. No more fines. No more threats. This ends now. The next morning, David files a formal complaint with the police, but the officer on duty looks disinterested. Officer. Without cameras or witnesses, there's not much we can do, sir. It's probably just a prank. Emily leans forward, her voice sharp. Emily. A prank? Someone vandalized our home. That's not a prank. But the officer only shrugs, filling out the report with lazy strokes of his pen. Narrator, VO. Just like that, the message was clear, we were on our own. Cut to a tense family dinner. Plates of food sit untouched. Laura stares at her hands. Emily glares at the window. David sits at the head of the table, gripping his fork like it's the only thing keeping him grounded. Narrator, VO. That night, we weren't just angry. We were scared. Because if they could paint our garage door, what would be next? Montage. Laura double-checking the locks on every door. Emily setting up a chair by her bedroom window, a baseball bat leaning against the wall. David sitting in the dark living room, a flashlight in one hand, his phone in the other, scrolling through HOA bylaws like their battle plans. Narrator, VO. They wanted to break us. But all they did was light a fire. Cut to the following day, the Miller family attends an HOA board meeting in the community clubhouse. The room is filled with neatly dressed board members, clipboards in hand, and Mr. Thompson presiding at the center table like a judge. David stands, holding a stack of violation letters in one hand and the police report in the other. His voice is firm, loud enough to silence the murmurs around the room. David. We know what you're doing. And we won't stand for it anymore. Thompson smirks, leaning back in his chair. Thompson. Careful, Mr. Miller. Non-compliance has consequences. Emily steps forward, glaring directly at him. Emily. So does harassment. The tension in the room is electric. Neighbors shift uncomfortably in their chairs. A few exchange glances, some guilty, some fearful. Narrator, VO. That was the breaking point. The night everything changed. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were declaring war. Final shot, a close-up of the spray-painted garage door under the harsh glow of a street lamp. The word "rule breakers" looms like a blood-red scar across the Miller home. Fade out. The clubhouse confrontation was only the beginning. By the following week, the HOA's retaliation was in full swing. Narrator, VO. If we thought the spray paint was the worst they could do, we were wrong. That was just their opening shot. Cut to David checking the family mailbox. His face hardens as he pulls out a thick envelope stamped with the HOA's logo. Inside, a stack of violation notices, each one more absurd than the last. Improperly stored trash cans. Grass exceeding 2.5 inches. Unapproved holiday decorations. David drops the papers on the kitchen table with a heavy thud. Laura picks them up one by one, her face shifting from disbelief to outrage. Laura. They fined us for leaving a recycling bin on the curb. That's not even against the bylaws. Emily storms into the room, clutching her phone. Emily. Dad, listen to this. They've been posting about us on the neighborhood forum. Calling us freeloaders. Saying we don't respect the community. David rubs his temples, his jaw tight. Narrator, VO. They wanted to bury us in paper. Crush us under fines. Turn the neighborhood against us. But we weren't going to play defense anymore. It was time to strike back. Cut to Emily typing furiously on her laptop. A Facebook group titled Homeowners for Fair Treatment flashes on screen. Within hours, posts flood in, other neighbors sharing their own stories of unfair fines, harassment, and intimidation. Neighbor number 1, online post. They fined me for a flower pot because it wasn't on their approved list. Neighbor number 2, online post. I paid $500 for a fence they made me tear down. I thought I was the only one. Narrator, VO. For years, everyone thought they were alone. But once we started talking, the truth came out. This wasn't just about us. The HOA had been running this neighborhood like a dictatorship. Cut to a backyard barbecue at the Miller house. Neighbors gather quietly, watching the street to make sure no board members are near. David stands at the grill, flipping burgers, while Laura distributes drinks. Emily speaks passionately to a small circle of residents. Emily. We can't let them keep doing this to us. They hide behind rules, but they're just using them to bully people. If we push back together, they can't ignore us. The neighbors nod. For the first time, there's a spark of unity. Narrator, VO. That night, we weren't just a family under attack. We were a movement. Montage. Emily printing flyers, Know Your Rights, HOA accountability meeting. Laura going door to door, handing them out discreetly. David studying stacks of HOA bylaws late into the night, highlighting contradictions and loopholes. But the HOA wasn't idle either. The very next morning, the Millers wake to find a bright orange sticker slapped across their front door, Final Notice, Compliance Required. Laura tears it down, her hands trembling. Narrator, VO. They thought intimidation would silence us. But all it did was prove our point. Cut to a heated board meeting a week later. The room is packed with residents, more than ever before. David takes the floor, armed with binders full of evidence. Emily stands beside him, laptop open, streaming the meeting live to their Facebook group. David. These fines aren't about rules. They're about control. And we have proof. He slams down a stack of papers showing inconsistencies and violation notices across the neighborhood. Gasps ripple through the room as other homeowners realize they've been targeted unfairly too. Mr. Thompson glares, his face red with barely contained rage. Thompson. You think you can undermine this board with your theatrics? This is a private matter. Sit down. But this time, no one sits down. One by one, neighbors stand in silent solidarity. Narrator, VO. They weren't afraid anymore. The fear was shifting. For the first time, the board was the one on defense. Cut to Thompson storming out of the meeting, slamming the door behind him. The room erupts in whispered conversations. David looks at Laura and Emily. For the first time in weeks, they smile. It's small, but it's real. Narrator, VO. The war wasn't over. Far from it. But the balance had shifted. And they knew it. Final shot, the Miller family walking out of the clubhouse together. Neighbors follow behind them, their faces lit with determination. In the background, the clubhouse lights flicker and die, leaving the screen in darkness. Fade out. The weeks that followed felt like living under siege. The HOA doubled down. Every day brought a new notice, a new letter, a new threat. But the Millers had something the board didn't expect: momentum. Narrator, VO. They thought we'd break under pressure. But instead, every notice they sent, every fine they issued, was fuel. And the fire was spreading. Cut to Emily scrolling through the Facebook group. Membership has skyrocketed from a few dozen to over 200 residents. Posts flood the page, photos of bogus fines, stories of harassment, and questions about where the HOA's money was really going. Neighbor, comment. Why are we paying hundreds every month? Where's it all going? The clubhouse roof still leaks. Narrator, VO. And then, one question changed everything. The screen freezes on Emily's, eyes widening at the comment. She rushes downstairs, laptop in hand. Emily. Dad. Mom. Listen to this, people are asking where the money's going. What if it's not going anywhere? David pauses, then slowly leans back in his chair, gears turning in his mind. David. If they've been mismanaging funds, that's not just unfair. That's illegal. The room goes silent. Narrator, VO. It was a theory. But if it was true, it could tear the board apart. Montage. David poring over HOA financial records late at night, his desk covered in receipts, bank statements, and bylaws. Emily highlighting suspicious transactions in bright yellow. Laura photographing documents and uploading them to the growing online group. Cut to David holding up a page, his finger tapping a line item, miscellaneous expenses, $15,000. David. $15,000, with no explanation. And here, another $8,000 for maintenance. But no maintenance was ever done. Emily shakes her head in disbelief. Emily. They're bleeding the community dry. And nobody noticed because they kept us too busy fighting over petty fines. Narrator, VO. It wasn't just about rules anymore. This was fraud. And we had the evidence. The next HOA meeting is different. The room is buzzing before it even begins. Neighbors whisper, clutching copies of the financial records the Millers had distributed door to door. Thompson and the board shuffle nervously at the front table. The meeting begins. Thompson bangs his gavel. Thompson. We'll address violations first. Item 1. David stands abruptly, cutting him off. David. No. Tonight, we're not talking about grass height or garbage cans. Tonight, we're talking about where our money has gone. The room erupts. Residents wave papers in the air, shouting over one another. Thompson's face reddens. Thompson. Order! Sit down. These accusations are baseless. Emily steps forward, her voice strong and clear. Emily. Then explain this. She projects the financial records onto a screen. Rows of suspicious expenses flash across the wall. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Neighbor. $15,000 for miscellaneous? Where did that go? Neighbor number 2. We paid for repairs that never happened. I want answers. Thompson slams the gavel again, his hand trembling. Thompson. This is slander. None of this proves anything. David leans forward, his voice low but cutting. David. Then prove us wrong. Show us the receipts. Show us where the money went. A tense silence fills the room. Thompson avoids eye contact, shuffling his papers. Narrator, VO. And in that silence, everyone heard the truth. Neighbors begin chanting, "Show us the money. Show us the money." Laura watches from the back, clutching Emily's hand. For the first time, she sees fear, not in her family, but in the board. Narrator, VO. They weren't the ones in control anymore. We were. Thompson finally explodes, slamming the gavel down so hard it cracks. Thompson. This meeting is over. He storms out, his fellow board members trailing behind him. But the residents don't leave. They keep chanting, louder and louder, until the walls shake. Cut to later that night. The Miller family sits around their kitchen table, exhausted but energized. A laptop sits open with an email draft addressed to the state attorney general's office. David hovers over the keyboard, his finger above the send button. David. If we send this, there's no turning back. Laura nods firmly. Laura. They left us no choice. Emily leans forward. Emily. Do it. David hits send. Narrator, VO. In that moment, the battle turned into a war. And the board had no idea what was coming next. Final shot, the laptop screen glowing in the dark kitchen, the cursor blinking on the sent email confirmation. The family sits in silence, shadows stretching long behind them. Fade out. The Miller family had lit a fuse. For weeks, the HOA board tried to regain control. Letters still came. Fines still arrived. Thompson strutted through the neighborhood, pretending nothing had changed. But whispers followed him wherever he went. Neighbors avoided his gaze, conversation stopped when he walked by. Narrator, VO. Their power wasn't built on fairness. It was built on fear. And when people stopped being afraid, everything began to crumble. The legal hit. One morning, a certified letter arrived. David tore it open at the kitchen table. The header was unmistakable, Office of the State Attorney General, Consumer Protection Division. David, reading aloud. An investigation has been opened into the financial practices of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association. The family exchanged stunned looks. Emily covered her mouth, whispering, "Emily." They actually listened. Narrator, VO. The email we'd sent weeks before had become a formal investigation. And now, it wasn't just our fight, it was the state's. Cut to Thompson's driveway. He storms out of his house, letter in hand, veins bulging in his neck. Cameras follow him as reporters rush forward. Reporter: Mr. Thompson, do you have any comment about the investigation into the HOA's finances? He shoves past them, face red. Thompson: No comment. The clip plays again later that evening on the local news, the words HOA under investigation plastered across the screen. The community uprising. At the next HOA meeting, the room is overflowing. Residents who had never attended before cram into the space, standing along the walls, whispering and holding papers. David and Laura sit together, Emily beside them with her phone out, recording everything. The board looks cornered, their stack of folders and gavel no longer symbols of power but of desperation. Thompson, clearing throat: We are still in charge of this community. This so-called investigation is baseless. But before he can continue, a neighbor rises from the back. Neighbor number 1. Baseless? You charged me $500 for painting my fence the wrong shade of beige while you stole from us. The room erupts with shouts. Another neighbor waves a packet of papers. Neighbor number 2. These are copies of the bank statements you tried to hide. We all saw them. You can't cover this up anymore. Thompson slams his fist down. Thompson: Order! This is my meeting. David rises, his voice calm but steady. David: No. This is our meeting. And we're done being silent. Cheers break out. Someone chants, "Step down. Step down." Others join until the room vibrates with it. The public exposure. Suddenly, Emily stands and projects her phone screen onto the wall. It shows a live stream, hundreds of viewers watching the meeting online. Comments flood the chat, expose them. Get rid of the HOA. We're with you. Emily. The world is watching now. Every lie, every excuse, it's all being recorded. Thompson's face drains of color. His fellow board members exchange panicked looks. Narrator, VO. They thrived in the shadows. But when the spotlight hit, their power withered. David takes a step closer to the board's table. David. You've stolen from us, harassed us, and tried to break us. But tonight, you answer to the people you swore to represent. The room falls silent, the weight of his words settling like stone. The breaking point. Thompson's hands shake as he fumbles with his notes. Sweat beads on his forehead. Finally, he snaps. Thompson. You think you've won? You think some investigation will change anything? We've run this neighborhood for years, and nobody's taking that from us. He lunges forward, snatching the live streaming phone from Emily's hands. Gasps echo through the room. But before he can shut it off, David grabs his wrist. The two men lock eyes, decades of bitterness, arrogance, and defiance clashing with quiet resilience and unyielding determination. David speaks softly but firmly. David. It's already too late. He releases Thompson's wrist. The live stream continues, the comments exploding. He just attacked her. Unbelievable. This guy's done. Thompson staggers back, realizing what he's done. The room is dead silent, all eyes on him. The collapse. Laura steps forward, voice ringing clear. Laura. We call for a vote. Right here. Right now. All in favor of dissolving this corrupt board and demanding a full audit, raise your hand. Almost every hand in the room shoots up. A tidal wave of unity, undeniable and unstoppable. Emily films it all, her eyes shining with tears. Narrator, VO. In that moment, the fear was gone. The silence was broken. And the board's reign ended, not with dignity, but with disgrace. Thompson looks around wildly, realizing he has no supporters left. His gavel clatters to the table as he storms out, shoulders hunched, shouts chasing him into the night. Cliffhanger into resolution. The camera pans over the room, neighbors hugging, cheering, tears of relief mixing with laughter. The Millers stand at the center, exhausted but victorious, surrounded by the people they fought for. David grips Laura's hand tightly. Emily looks at her phone screen, thousands now watching live. Narrator, VO. The battle was over. But the war for what would come next had only just begun. Final shot, the abandoned board table at the front of the room, the broken gavel lying across it. The symbol of their power now nothing more than splintered wood. Fade out. The HOA board had collapsed overnight. For years, they ruled with unchecked power, stamping fines and dictating lives. But now, their signatures meant nothing, their letters no longer carried weight. And in the homes that lined Lakeview Estates, something unfamiliar began to spread. Not fear. Not silence. But freedom. The immediate aftermath. The morning after the meeting, the neighborhood looked different. It wasn't the houses or the manicured lawns, it was the way people stood outside, smiling at one another, conversations flowing across fences. For the first time in years, the street felt like a community instead of a prison yard patrolled by clipboards and threats. David walked the sidewalk with Laura, Emily trailing behind with her phone still buzzing from messages. Cars slowed as neighbors rolled down windows to wave. One older resident clasped David's hand tightly. Older neighbor. I thought no one would ever stand up to them. Thank you. David just nodded, humbled. The state's verdict. Weeks passed, but the battle wasn't over. The investigation by the Attorney General's office intensified. Subpoenas flew. Bank accounts were frozen. Reporters came back, filming on quiet streets that once seemed invisible to the world. One afternoon, Emily raced into the living room holding her laptop. Emily. They posted the report. The family crowded around. The findings were damning: misuse of funds, falsified records, harassment of residents. Tens of thousands siphoned away under the guise of maintenance fees. The headline that followed appeared across local news stations. Lakeview Estates HOA found guilty of fraud, leadership banned from future boards. The consequences. Thompson and the remaining board members were hit with fines larger than anything they had ever imposed. Some faced lawsuits from residents seeking damages. Others simply disappeared, moving away in shame. At the next town council meeting, the HOA charter was officially dissolved. The neighborhood would now elect a voluntary resident committee, transparent, accountable, and powerless to abuse. David was offered a seat. He declined. David. I didn't fight to sit in their chair. I fought to break it. The room applauded. Healing the neighborhood. With the HOA gone, subtle changes began reshaping life in Lakeview Estates. The petty restrictions lifted, swing sets returned to backyards, front doors painted in colors other than approved beige, flower gardens blooming without fear of fines. Laura planted roses out front, something she'd always wanted but was told didn't fit community aesthetics. Emily filmed the moment and uploaded it with the caption, "First Roses in Lakeview Estates. Freedom looks beautiful." The clip went viral. Neighbors organized a block party, the first in over a decade. Kids rode bikes without being told to stay off common property. Families grilled in driveways, laughter rising where silence once smothered. Narrator, VO. The chains weren't made of steel. They were made of rules, intimidation, and fear. But once broken, the neighborhood discovered something far stronger: unity. The Millers' personal victory. One evening, sitting on their porch, David turned to Laura. David. Remember when we first moved here? We thought this place was perfect. Laura smiled softly. Laura. It wasn't perfect. But maybe now, it can be. Emily, scrolling her phone, chimed in. Emily. People are still messaging me. They want to know how we did it, how we stood up to an HOA. Some even say they're fighting their own battles now. David leaned back, watching the sunset. David. Then maybe this isn't just about us. Maybe this was bigger all along. A ripple beyond Lakeview. Indeed, the story spread far beyond their quiet community. News outlets covered it as a rare example of residents defeating a corrupt HOA. Online forums buzzed with discussions. Emails poured in from people across the country, each with their own horror stories: families fined into debt, retirees bullied into selling homes, veterans threatened over flags. Emily's live stream clips were shared millions of times. The Millers became symbols, not heroes, not martyrs, but proof that resistance was possible. Narrator, VO. One neighborhood stand became another's blueprint. And slowly, what was once a private war turned into a public awakening. Closure for the villain. One last image lingered: Thompson, seen weeks later outside a county courthouse. No cameras this time, no reporters clamoring for his words. Just a man stripped of power, shoulders slumped, muttering as he signed restitution agreements. He glanced up once, catching David's eye across the parking lot. For a flicker of a moment, the old arrogance sparked, but it faded instantly, swallowed by shame. David didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The final reflection. On a cool autumn night, the Millers sat together on their porch swing, the roses in bloom nearby. The neighborhood was quiet, but not the suffocating silence of fear. This was peace. Laura rested her head on David's shoulder. Laura. Do you think it's finally over? David exhaled slowly. David. Over? No. But it's different now. They don't own us anymore. Emily snapped a picture of her parents, uploading it with one final caption. Lakeview Estates, free at last. It exploded online, a symbol of resilience. Closing narration. Narrator, VO. In the end, the fight wasn't about lawns, fences, or paint colors. It was about dignity. About people refusing to live under fear disguised as order. The Millers didn't just win their freedom, they reminded everyone watching that even the smallest voices can topple giants. The camera pulls back, rising above the neighborhood. The manicured lawns still gleam, the houses still stand in rows, but now, they belong to the people again, not the board. Narrator, VO. And sometimes, the only way to beat the system is to remind it who really holds the power. Fade out. The fight was over. The papers were signed. The board was gone. But for the Millers, and for Lakeview Estates, the true story was only just beginning. A new normal. Weeks had rolled into months since the final collapse of the HOA. What was once a neighborhood strangled by rules had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Front yards bloomed with individuality. One family painted their house a daring deep blue, another built a treehouse in their oak tree. Someone even parked a classic old pickup truck on the street, a direct defiance of the old bands. Instead of complaints, it drew admiration. David walked through the neighborhood each evening. Not patrolling, not fighting, but simply walking. Dogs barked from porches, kids waved, neighbors invited him to share a drink. It wasn't the sterile, perfect Lakeview the HOA demanded, it was something better. It was alive. The Miller family's reflection. One quiet Sunday morning, the Millers sat around their kitchen table. Coffee steamed in David's mug. Laura flipped through a scrapbook Emily had started, clippings of news articles, screenshots of Emily's viral live streams, even letters from strangers thanking them for their courage. Laura shook her head with a smile. Laura. I never thought fighting with a homeowners association would change anything beyond our street. Emily looked up from her phone. Emily. It's bigger than that, Mom. People are calling it the Lakeview Stand. Some are even using it in community workshops. It's like, our story's teaching people they don't have to just take it. David leaned back, thoughtful. David. Funny thing. They said we were bad neighbors. Troublemakers. But maybe that's what this place needed, someone willing to make trouble. The three shared a quiet laugh, the kind that carried both relief and pride. The ripple effect. Beyond Lakeview, the story continued to ripple. Advocacy groups reached out to Emily, asking her to speak about her experience. Podcasts invited David. Laura was asked to write an article for a local magazine. Everywhere they turned, people wanted to know the same thing. How did you do it? How did you stand up to them? Emily posted one final video, a message directly to anyone struggling under HOA tyranny. Emily, to camera. They tell you you're powerless. That you're alone. That you can't fight them. But that's exactly how they keep control. You're not alone. And once you stop being afraid, they can't win. The video hit 1 million views in a week. Closure for the community. At the next neighborhood gathering, neighbors surprised the Millers with a small plaque. It wasn't fancy, just a wooden board with carved words. To the Millers, for reminding us who we really are. David held it in his hands, speechless. Laura brushed away a tear. Emily grinned, recording it all. The plaque didn't hang in any clubhouse or official building. Instead, they mounted it on the Miller family's porch, where everyone walking by could see it. A symbol that this time, the recognition belonged to the people, not the board. Thompson's final shadow. And yet, not everyone had forgotten. Rumors surfaced of Thompson filing appeals, muttering about how he'd been wronged. But no one cared anymore. His name no longer carried fear. If anything, it carried pity. One night, David passed him in the grocery store. Thompson avoided his gaze, cart half empty, shoulders hunched. David said nothing, only walking by. And that silence, that lack of fear, was more devastating to Thompson than any shouted argument ever could be. The lesson in the struggle. Sitting again on their porch, David reflected aloud. David. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the fines. It wasn't the threats. It was thinking we couldn't do anything about it. That's how they win, when you give up before you even try. Laura nodded. Laura. And the best part? David smiled faintly. David. Realizing we were never fighting alone. Emily, listening, posted those words later as a quote on her social feed. It went viral, just like everything else. A final night. Months later, as the seasons turned, the Millers hosted a dinner on their porch. Neighbors brought food, laughter echoing late into the night. No one mentioned the old HOA anymore, not out of fear, but because it no longer mattered. David raised a glass. David. To freedom. To community. To never letting fear write the rules again. The toast was met with cheers, glasses clinking. The camera lingers on their faces, Laura's soft smile, Emily's bright determination, David's quiet strength. Closing narration. Narrator, VO. In the end, Lakeview Estates didn't become perfect. It became real. A place where people lived, not just existed. A place where fear lost, and courage won. And for the Millers, their victory was never about lawns or paint colors, it was about proving that no one, not even the most powerful board, could take away their right to live freely. The camera pulls back one final time, rising high above the houses, the lights glowing warmly in the night. Narrator, VO. And so, the lesson endures, when ordinary people stand together, even the strongest walls of control can crumble. Sometimes, the only thing more powerful than fear, is the decision to fight it. Fade to black. The fight, the fear, the long nights, it was all behind them now. Yet in many ways, the story of the Millers was never just about their family. It was about everyone who has ever been silenced, cornered, or made to feel small by those in power. The camera opens on the Miller porch at dusk. The wooden plaque glints faintly in the fading light. To the Millers, for reminding us who we really are. A quiet evening. David sits on the steps, sleeves rolled up, hands clasped loosely as he watches Emily water the flowers along the path. Laura leans against the doorway, her face bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. The neighborhood around them is calm. Not silent, but calm. A guitar plays faintly in the distance. Children laugh, chasing each other through a yard where once a "No Playing on Grass" sign had stood. It is ordinary. It is imperfect. It is alive. Flashbacks in the silence. As David sits, his mind drifts. Quick flashes of memory overlay the scene. Thompson standing smugly at a board meeting. The harsh slap of fines taped to their door. Laura's trembling hand holding another threatening letter. Emily's tear-streaked face after a neighbor's cruel words. And then, the shift. Emily live streaming, her voice strong and unbroken. Neighbors whispering, then rallying, then cheering. The courtroom, the judge's gavel striking down the board's power. The plaque, lifted high, handed to them by grateful hands. The memories fade. David blinks, returning to the present. Laura's question. Laura steps down from the doorway, joining David on the step. She leans her head lightly against his shoulder. Laura, do you think people will remember all this? Or will it just fade? David takes a slow breath. David. They'll remember. Not the meetings, not the paperwork, but the feeling. That moment when they realized they weren't powerless anymore. You don't forget that. Laura smiles softly. Laura. And what about us? What do we take from it? David looks at Emily, still tending the flowers with quiet determination. David. That when you fight for something that matters, you change more than rules. You change people. Starting with yourself. Emily's symbol. Emily finishes watering and sets the can aside. She kneels by the flower bed, the same patch of earth once deemed non-compliant by the HOA. Now, it is vibrant. Roses, daisies, and a stubborn wildflower she planted on purpose all bloom together. She plucks one flower and hands it to her mother, smiling. Emily. From the yard they said we couldn't have. Laura laughs gently, taking it. Laura. Then this flower means more than all the rules they ever wrote. The camera lingers on the flower in Laura's hand, delicate yet unbroken. A message to the future. The scene shifts to Emily later that night, recording one last video for her followers. She sits in her room, fairy lights glowing behind her. Emily, to camera. This isn't just our story. It's yours too. Wherever you are, whoever you are, if someone's telling you that you don't belong, that you can't fight back, remember us. Remember that no rule is stronger than your courage. And no board is stronger than a community that refuses to be silent. She pauses, steadying her voice. Emily. They thought they could break us. Instead, they made us stronger. She ends the recording. The screen fades to black for just a beat. The closing gathering. The final montage begins. The neighborhood is shown celebrating another porch dinner, laughter, food, lights strewn between trees. Children play tag without restriction. Music drifts through the air. The Millers move among their neighbors, no longer the troublemakers, but the heart of the community. David shakes hands with a man who once voted against him. Laura hugs a neighbor who once filed a complaint. Emily shows kids how to set up a phone tripod, inspiring them to tell their own stories. The past divisions are gone. What remains is unity. Thompson's final image. One last cut shows Thompson. Alone. Sitting in his car, parked just outside the community he no longer controls. His face is pale, unreadable. He watches the lights and laughter spilling out into the street, but does not step out. The message is unspoken but clear. Power lost through fear cannot be reclaimed once people are free. He drives away. The camera rise. The camera pulls upward once more. From the Miller porch, past the gathering, past the glowing houses of Lakeview Estates. The night sky expands above. The sounds of laughter grow faint, then echo, then fade into the narration. Final narration. Narrator, VO. The Millers never asked to be heroes. They asked for nothing more than the right to live in peace. But when peace was denied, they stood. And in standing, they reminded everyone that courage doesn't always roar, sometimes, it's just a family refusing to back down. Narrator, VO. In every neighborhood, in every town, there are those who think power belongs only to them. But power, true power, has always belonged to the people willing to fight for each other. And that is the legacy of Lakeview Estates. Not rules. Not fines. Not fear. But freedom. The music swells, hopeful, cinematic, triumphant. Final line. The screen fades completely to black. On-screen text. Sometimes, the strongest walls fall to the quietest voices that refuse to be silenced. Fade out. The screen is dark. Then, slowly, light emerges. We see the Miller house at dawn. The world feels different now. The chaos, the noise, the fear of the past has given way to stillness. A soft, golden light spills across the lawn, the same lawn once at the heart of fines, warnings, and threats. But today, it's simply grass. Green, open, alive. A symbol reborn. Emily steps outside, barefoot, clutching a notebook. She kneels in the yard where she once cried after a threatening letter arrived. The camera lingers as she presses her palm into the earth, leaving a faint impression in the soil. The notebook opens. She begins sketching, not words, not rules, but a drawing of her home surrounded by flowers, neighbors smiling, kids playing freely. Her voice, soft but firm, begins narrating over the imagery. Emily's closing monologue. Emily, VO. They wanted us to follow their rules. They wanted us afraid. But we chose something else. We chose to live, even when it wasn't easy. We chose to fight, even when it felt impossible. And we chose to believe that no one can take away what makes a family, a home, or a community. The scene cuts to her sketch. It's simple, but full of color and joy. The kind of picture a child might draw of what home should feel like. Emily, VO. This was never about lawns or fences. It was about freedom. About dignity. About the right to belong. And now, we do. The final gathering. The neighborhood gathers one last time, not at a meeting table, not under rules, but in the open yard. Children chalk bright drawings on the pavement, hearts, suns, houses. Neighbors string up lanterns in the trees. A barbecue smokes in the background, laughter rising with the flames. The Millers move through it all with ease. No longer outsiders. No longer rule breakers. Just part of the fabric of something stronger than any board. The plaque from earlier, the one engraved to the Millers, for reminding us who we really are, now hangs proudly on the Miller porch. It glints in the sunlight as if sealing the victory not just for them, but for everyone. The metaphorical shot. The camera pulls back. The neighborhood shrinks in the distance. We rise higher, past the rooftops, past the lake glimmering at the edge of town. The sound of laughter blends with Emily's voice once more. Emily, VO. When people tell you to stay quiet, that's when your voice matters most. When they try to make you feel small, that's when your courage has to be the loudest. And when they say you don't belong, that's when you stand taller, because you do. The camera continues rising until the houses look like tiny blocks, the lake like a mirror reflecting the sky. The final symbol. Just as the screen is about to fade, the image sharpens. A single flower, a wildflower, growing strong at the edge of the Miller's yard. It sways in the wind, delicate yet unbroken, a symbol of everything the HOA tried to crush, but couldn't. Emily, VO. They thought they could silence us. But sometimes, the quietest voices grow into the loudest echoes. The wildflower remains in frame. The neighborhood fades to black around it, until only the flower glows in the final shot. Final narration. Narrator, VO. This is more than a neighborhood story. This is a reminder that power doesn't come from rules written on paper, but from people willing to stand together. And that sometimes, the greatest battles are fought not with armies, but with families who refuse to back down. Closing line. The screen turns fully black. A single line fades in, white against the darkness. Home is not where rules are written. Home is where courage lives. The music swells one last time, hopeful, victorious, cinematic. Fade out.